Where are you implementing machines versus free weights? And do you have a mix or do you favor one more than the other?
I definitely have a mix in my session. I think they both have a place. They have advantages and disadvantages, strengths and weaknesses that we can utilize at our favor, depending on what your goal is, your biomechanics, what your time, if you're cutting, if you're in a deficit and you're approaching a show, or if you're in a surplus and you have more calories, you're stronger. So those are all factors that you need to consider. Yeah, definitely, like a machine is not going to be as good as a free weight when you talk about biomechanics, because free weights allow you to move according to your biomechanics, the way you're built.
With the upper body, especially shoulder complex, I find that it gets a little bit more complicated to fit yourself into machines, like for the reasons you mentioned. Whereas again, depending on the machine and the body part, like so I find chest presses is the like any sort of pressing machines, I find that those are tricky. Like that's a tricky to find one that fits really nice for your body. For me personally, and my mechanics and how I experienced it. But again, it's depends. It really does depend. But what's your take on that?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Yeah, especially pressing. I think I use only one machine for pressing that I like from Arsenal Strength is a chest press, horizontal. I completely agree with you. Not all machines are suited for your biomechanics, so you have to strategize and understand what works for you, especially if you get a lot of stress in the shoulders. That's something that you want to avoid. And I started my session, for example, with dumbbells. That allows me to have the most freedom,
Yeah.
even more than a barbell.
Yes. Yeah.
I was doing a lot of barbell work during COVID because I had my own setup in my garage, and I noticed that over time my shoulder was getting stressed, and I attributed that to the fact that probably had some imbalances between left and right. So the barbell kind of probably stressed one area over another, and then I started developing some shoulder pain. So that's why I switched to dumbbells, and that seemed to take care of the problem. So, but machines are very good when you're cutting and you don't have the same amount of calories and you're
Right.
approaching it's safer.
Yes, yes, yes.
So
Versus like picking up dumbbells for warm-up sets and working sets or barbells with the plates. It can be exhausting, especially if you're doing 3, 4 exercises like this. I noticed that. And I'm like, if I just had a machine, I could just, with the weight stack, selectorize, you could just pop, pop, pop. It's so much better, saves a lot of energy and decreases a lot of fatigue, I would assume.
yeah, especially the shoulder press. Once he gets to I'm not a very strong guy, but once I get to the hundreds, and it's a pain to get them up there.
Yes. And unless you have somebody who's handing you the dumbbells.
Yeah.
That would be nice, right? You've seen those videos with the bodybuilders. They have like two partners, and one is handing him the 120, and the other guy's handing him the other 120. He doesn't have to do anything; just sits in the chair and waits for the dumbbells to be handed to him.
Yeah, and that's a great movement. From there,
Yeah, safer too. I find that most issues happen at the first rep, like because you're just getting it into position. It's not the last with the dumbbell press. It's like the first, because if you can't get into the position well, or you twist funny and you trying to get the dumbbells up, pop, that's how you can tweak something. You got to be very smart with how you kick the dumbbells up, and maybe even having someone, if you're lucky, that can just help you with that first rep to get you out of that weird bottom position where it's a bit too deep.
Completely.
Yeah, that's my experience, and I'm sure many others who are listening can relate to that one. So you basically do a mix of machine to free weights, and just to summarize, with the upper body, it's kind of similar. You're doing mostly free weights, cables, dumbbells, and then lower body, are you implementing more machines, or are you also doing free weights? Like, for example, are you doing barbell squats and deadlifts, for example, barbell deadlift, dumbbell deadlifts? Are you doing anything like this?
Yeah. Toward my off season last year, the main movements for my quads were leg extension, back barbell squats, leg press, and then toward the contest, so maybe 6 weeks out, yeah, something like that, I removed the barbell squats and I replaced it with the hack squats. The reason that I mentioned is safety and some of the pain that I was getting in my lower back, just because the calories are lower and your body is more sensitive, especially in the joints. Yeah, I found the hack squats to be a great alternative.
I like what you mentioned though earlier, where you switch from the barbell pressing to the dumbbell, and that seemed to resolve pretty much the issue. Is that accurate? What you said?
Yeah.
What you said? Yeah. So it's funny because like a lot of people think, oh, I have an issue here doing this exercise. Oh, something's wrong. I got to fix it. Maybe sometimes fixing it is as simple as changing the exercise and never going back to that one ever again. Correct. But like, right? Like I find that people they panic, and hey, listen, some exercises are just not going to agree with your structure, your anatomy, and what you have available to work with as far as ranges and positions are concerned. So tell you what, don't think about it in a negative way. Just look for the ones that feel good for your body. Which exercises feel good for your body and match you well, and stick with those, and don't think something's wrong with you or that you're broken right away, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, because we have been told so many times that if you want to develop good legs, you need to do barbell squats. If you don't do barbell squats, then you're not training as hard. Unfortunately, like if you can fit barbell squats into your routine, great, awesome. But if you can't, there are alternatives. Don't try to feed yourself into the exercise. Just find the exercise that fits you. That's what I say all the time to everyone. There are great alternatives, and what's important in bodybuilding is stimulating the muscle, and in the most efficient way. That means that if you get the most amount of stimulus with the least amount of fatigue in your CNS or in your joints or whatever that is, that's the best outcome, and that's the one you should pursue. So
I love that.
If you have more calories, more recovery, all the better. Do heavy compounds, and for example, toward my second part of the prep, I wasn't doing any flat barbell bench press or complete deadlifts, or as I mentioned, also the barbell squats, but I was doing alternatives like chest press and partial deadlifts, as I called it. Sometimes they call it RDL, but it's a similar type of movement. So you want to try to keep all the maximum tension on the back, because what I noticed is that if you do a complete deadlift, then toward the end of the movement, you're basically using your legs. But I want to keep it on my lower back. So that's why I limit the range and I keep the tension on the back. So I wasn't doing any of the three main movements, but I think I got the stimulus that I was looking for.
And the deadlifts are with the barbell, correct?
Yeah. With the barbells, yeah. I like dumbbells, but sometimes you cannot get the same amount of weight that you can get with a barbell.
It's funny. People will say like, oh, deadlifts from a rack, that's cheating. Oh, deadlifts from a rack is not good for bodybuilding. Like, let's say, for example, you're saying you're not deadlifting necessarily from the floor. You're kind of doing like Dorian Yates, if I had to envision what you're talking about, where he's doing deadlift to like almost shin level, but he's keeping it moving. It's not a dead stop. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, there is no dead stop. I don't use the safety bars. I actually learned that movement from him, and the reasoning behind it made complete sense. So that's why I implemented also in my routine.
See, where I was going with this was, if you're using the rack simply, because if you look at Dorian Yates, how he was doing it, his first rep, he picked up the deadlift from the floor. Mm-hmm. But if you use the rack and just use it just for that initial rep to avoid some fatigue also, because it's easier to put plates on the bar from a rack than having to do it from the floor. We know this. Right. Anybody who's listening, who's in bodybuilding or training seriously, knows that that's probably one of the most annoying things, is having to put the plates on with the barbell from the floor. Like, you got to lift the barbell and then you got to slide the plates on. But if it's from a rack, then it's obviously a lot easier, less fatiguing. So if you just set it up where it's just for that first rep, and then you can do it like how you're mentioning, keeping the constant tension, you're not doing a dead stop. There's nothing wrong with doing deadlifts from a rack. You see what I mean? Right. But people want to just box these things like Smith machine is bad, or they're cheating, or they're not as good as free weights. Everything is context specific, You need individual specifics to make such a claim, right?
Correct. And now we know a lot more, and the research is suggesting that there is no clear winner between machines and free weights, in terms of stimulating the muscle. I think Dorian used to do it off the floor because back then he didn't have a rack.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But if you see the later videos when he's actually training people, that's how they do it. They are in a rack and they lift it off the supports and then just do the exercise.
Yeah, makes sense. Why would you make it harder for yourself unnecessarily?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about how you currently train. Like, what was the training system that you used leading up to WNBF Worlds, and break down the structure of it, maybe the split, the volume, the frequency. How do you like to do things typically?